I call Phil Twyford, 5-minute call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. As my colleagues have pointed out, Labor is voting for this bill, but as with so much government legislation, we're voting for it because it's better than nothing, but not by much. This is typical of the kind of housing policy, the legislation, the initiatives that we've seen from this government while Nick Smith's been the Housing Minister. He is the Minister of grudging half measures. And this is a classic. It is a classic of the genre. Mr Speaker, we've got two main criticisms of this bill. One is that it's incoherent, it's shot through with loopholes, and it falls well short of what it could have done. But the other main criticism, Mr Speaker, is that this bill is pretending to be something that it's not. This bill is the National Party going into contortions trying to convey to the electorate of New Zealand that they are doing something about the housing crisis. But as with so much legislation that this government brings to the House, it is simply there to convey the idea that they are doing something. Now, sir, New Zealanders desperately want to see action on non-resident foreign buyers bidding up the cost of New Zealand houses and contributing to young Kiwi families being locked out of the housing market. And under that Minister, Nick Smith, we've got the lowest rate of home ownership in 64 years. And he's responsible. He's responsible for that. But let's think for a moment, what do New Zealanders want to see? And the Herald poll recently told us that 77% of New Zealanders want to see Labor's policy of a ban on non-resident foreign buyers buying existing houses implemented. 77%. Only 15% support the National Party's policy. 77% support Labor's policy of a ban on foreign buyers buying existing houses. 15% of people support Nick Smith's policy. In 3 News did a poll in July last year that showed 61% of New Zealanders support a ban on foreign buyers. 54% of National Party voters support a ban on foreign buyers, and 82% of New Zealanders support a register on foreign property ownership. 82%, and that, Mr Speaker, is why this bill is before the House. Because the polls got so bad for the National Party on this issue, they decided they had to do something. Because Kiwis are sick and tired of seeing their land and housing sold out from under their feet under this national government. The National Party, however, doesn't want to see a proper register of foreign property ownership that is transparent, that is clear, because they don't trust New Zealanders with the information. They don't want New Zealanders to see it. And that's why we've got this bill, Mr Speaker, because they want some half-hearted, weak-kneed bill that doesn't actually collect the data that's needed, and it won't be data that's actually made accessible and transparent to New Zealanders, because Nick Smith wants to selectively release his half-hearted data to spin for his own political reasons because he doesn't trust New Zealanders with that information. As Julianne Genter said earlier in this debate, all over the world, particularly in the Pacific Rim economies, offshore money is overheating domestic real estate markets. That's why the Australian government has a policy, like Labor does, of banning non-resident foreign buyers from buying existing houses. And that very successful policy is channeling Chinese investment into the building of apartments in Sydney and Melbourne, something that it would actually be quite nice for us to have in Auckland right now. Tony Abbott's got that policy. David Cameron has the policy of a fully searchable and transparent register of foreign property ownership because he's concerned about money laundering. But this government isn't, sir. And I think it's interesting to ask why the National Party takes this position. Why are they so blind to the desires of New Zealanders for some controls on offshore ownership in our real estate market? And I think, sir, there are two reasons. One, you can find in the recent report in the New Zealand Herald of a couple who were on the electoral roll as students, but they amassed $26 million worth of property in Auckland. And you know what that same report said in the New Zealand Herald? They donated $370,000 to the National Party's last election campaign. That gives you a little clue about why the National Government aren't interested in shutting down this mile-wide loophole in the legislation.
To interrupt the member, but his time has expired.